Hi, I'm Patricia Grabarek.
And I'm Katina Sawyer, and welcome to the Worker Being Podcast. Today, Patricia is going to share an article with us. Patricia, do you just want to give us a quick preview of your article before we get caught up on some of what's been going on with us lately?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about team reflexivity, or in other words, think about like team debriefs after projects or at the end of shifts, and how that impacts well-being. So kind of a different take on well-being, looking at a team perspective versus an individual employee. But it's a fun article, so I'm excited to share it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like so many people are working on teams, and there isn't a lot of guidance when you get put on a team what you should be doing or how you should be doing it. So this will be really helpful.
Yes, I hope so. I do want to ask you about your foot,
Yes.
your ankle.
Yes.
Your cast is off, yes?
Yes, the cast came off this morning, and then I went and got a pedicure because I was like very extra. And and also I don't know if anyone out there has ever had a leg cast before, but when you get the leg cast off, like everything under it has just been growing. So it was really funny to see like how like hairy your leg gets. And I decided when I saw it that I feel like, you know, it's not fair that women have to shave and men don't have to shave. But I decided when I saw it that actually I'm in favor of like everyone should shave their leg. Not-
like everyone do the work.
Yes, I think it should be equally that everyone should shave it, because when I saw my leg without it and I saw my leg with it and even just like felt how like itchy it was and stuff, I was like, you know, guys are really missing out on this nice clean leg deal that we've got going on. I know. So I said, you know what? I'm a proponent of the everyone shave the leg now, I think.
Makes sense. I did laser on my legs, and it's like the best thing that I've ever decided to do in my life, which sounds ridiculous, but it is.
No, it saves so much time. It's like amazing. No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
If I should probably just like bite the bullet and do that at some point, but
yeah, you'll have to find a good place. And then like what I did was I found a place that's pretty good. I know what kind of laser they use, so if you need a tip, I can help you find the right laser.
That there was laser variation.
There is. I've learned this, that there's different types of lasers, and the laser that they use this one place I really, really liked, because not only is it effective, but when it shoots you with like the laser, it shoots out a burst of cold air too.
Oh.
So, because the laser is hot, right? So you feel like a sting.
Yes.
And then the cold air kind of like, it's almost like distracts your body. It's like, whoa, wait, never mind, I'm not hot. And it doesn't hurt as bad. Like, it's so weird, but it really works, and I'm obsessed. Like,
that's awesome.
I would not go to any other laser place or a place that doesn't have this laser, because I love the like cool air shot that it shoots at you.
Look at that. I had no idea that there was even a type of laser to consider. I would have just shown up like a laser idiot and taken whatever laser they gave me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a difference. It's pretty amazing. And it was also because I actually found a Groupon for the place. So that like helped with like part of it, like only a certain number of sessions. But you just got to find like the neighborhood that is like really into it. Because like I feel like there's just certain neighborhoods in LA where there's a lot of them, and when there's a lot of different clinics that do it, then you get better prices and more Groupons and things like that.
I'm sure somewhere in DC this enclave of lasers exists.
Yeah, it's got to be somewhere.
Well, I didn't get it done before this, so it was pretty funny when I took the cast off. I was like, "Whoa, that's what happens if I." This is what things would have looked like if I didn't start shaving my legs in 6th grade. So that was interesting. But aside from that part, you know, everything's nice and clean now and looking good. And the forward progress is very encouraging. So I really appreciate the fact that things are moving along and they're like on schedule. And it's been 6 weeks now since I fell. So time is moving. I know time is moving along fast. And so I feel like they said basically within the next 2 weeks I'll be off crutches, and then 2 weeks after that I should be walking normally. So because these 6 weeks went so fast, I'm like, you know, Another month.
Almost there.
Not too bad. Yeah, almost there.
Yeah.
So, and then I'll be out and about and enjoying the summer months. I know. So I'm excited about that. What do you have going on? What have you been up to?
Oh man. Well, this weekend we did like a bunch of spring cleaning, which was awesome and very productive. And now I feel like I have other parts of the house I want to tackle. So it's kind of like started this snowball of spring cleaning.
Yeah, you can't stop.
Maybe snowball is not the right word because we're talking about spring, but whatever. We like basically took everything out of our closet and organized it and got rid of stuff we didn't need, and we did like a cleanse of, I mean, so much crap. That's and
awesome.
And then we put everything back in like in a very organized and neat fashion, and I'm very excited about it. So then like I just need to go through other parts of the house. Like I did all of my dressers and stuff like that already, and then I need to do the kitchen. So I have like different places that I want to tackle, but I have so much stuff to donate to, like literally just trash bags and trash bags full of stuff. And I'm like, why did I have all this stuff? It's just crazy when you think about it. It's like I spent all this money to buy so much stuff that I just don't use or don't wear or don't whatever. And I'm like, I feel like I'm generally pretty good about not buying something that I don't like, buying things that I love and not like just wasting money on just a random whatever. But I guess I love a lot of things at first and then I start hating them. I don't know, because there's just so much stuff. But
sometimes you like think you're gonna love something, and then like when you get it, it's like it's not practical, or it's not, I don't know, like and then every now and again I find something that I get and I'm like, oh, like that was probably stupid, and then like all I do is wear it and I'm like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. So sometimes you can be surprised. I have to do the same thing. I have to go through all my clothes because we have to store our clothes here because there's no like basement here, and the closets are like for, I was going to say medieval. Medieval is not correct. For like colonial people. And they just didn't, have as much stuff. So the closets are really small. So we have to like switch out our stuff from this like storage cellar in the backyard. And so before we get the summer stuff out, I have to go through all my other stuff and figure out what I'm giving away. Because there's a bunch of stuff I have to give away. So I'm doing the same thing. But it does feel good, like, when you, like, free yourself of it. You're like, like, I feel so much lighter.
Yeah, it's like all that weight that you're donating away feels like you feel it actually physically. It's weird.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's weird.
Well, I'm glad you got a lot of cleaning done. That's exciting.
Yeah, it was exciting. We also saw Aladdin this weekend.
Oh, how was it?
Like little things. Oh goodness. Well, I actually enjoyed it way more than I thought I was going to, because I was like a little bit nervous about the genie. So like I love Robin Williams. I love that initial genie.
Me too. I'm nervous about it too.
And I was like, Will Smith, like I like Will Smith for the most part, but I was like, is this genie gonna really be like the genie?
Yeah,
and like
Will
obviously
Smith genie
he wasn't,
is a different...
right? It's never gonna be perfect.
Yeah.
But I actually appreciated his genie, and I felt like he made it his own. It was like a Will Smith genie.
Yay, that's exciting. Yeah. I'm happy because when I first saw the genie, I was like a little scared by it because like it just looks like funny with whatever it is, like the CGI or whatever they do on it. And so I was like, oh no, I don't know if I can handle this whatever this is. But now that I've seen it even a couple more times in commercials and stuff, I'm like, all right, I think I can handle it. And someone was saying to me like that, because I also was like, why do they have to like redo all the like classic movies and whatever? But then someone was saying to me like that kids are so used to higher tech looking things that what we grew up with kind of looks like Steamboat Willie to them or something. Like if they want it to keep evolving and have new generations like it, they have to update how it looks because it's just going to look old and weird eventually. So like even like the Mickey sense. Like kids cartoons and stuff, they're all like more like, you know, like 3D like Pixar-y type animation. So like the flat animation stuff probably does look old to kids now. Yeah. So it made sense to me. I said, okay, I'll let it happen. That's a
decent point. I get that. And then I also think there's also a nostalgia factor, right? Like these movies came out when we were kids.
Yeah.
And like a lot of people that are our age have kids. So it's like not only are they going to rope in those kids, but those parents like want to see it too.
It's very true.
And then those of us without children that grew up with it still want to see it. So they kind of get a really good market because of the timing of it.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And they do fix some things. Like there's definitely some problematic things and themes in the original that they address and they change. So
that's good.
I won't spoil it, but
that's good.
I thought that was good too. So you'll see it one
Yay.
day. I will be curious to see what you think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I know that you don't watch Game of Thrones, so I can't talk about that with you, but I was very disappointed in the finale, very disappointed. But if anyone out there listening was similarly disappointed, which I'm sure people were, because like I feel like everybody was disappointed.
Everybody was, yeah.
Then you can send me a message and we can lament together.
Aw, yeah. I asked my parents about it and they were not thrilled. And yeah, I think there's like one person that I know that said that they liked the ending. Like I haven't really asked a lot of people because I don't watch it, so I don't care that much. But
yeah, right.
I've seen some stuff about it, and I think there's one person I know that posted something on Facebook that indicated they liked the ending, and I was like, oh, there's one.
First time for everything. Well, I disagree with that person. Boo. Boo them.
Well.
Yes, but not all things can be pleasantly surprising, as Aladdin was, which is the take-home message of our podcast today.
And we're done.
And we're done. And moving on to team dynamics. But anyway, actually, let's learn about team dynamics.
Yes, so teams and well-being. The article I chose to talk about today is from the Journal of Applied Psychology. It was published in 2018 by Chen, Bamberger, Song, and Vashti. And it was called The Effects of Team Reflexivity on Psychological Well-Being in Manufacturing Teams. So first thing, manufacturing teams, it's an interesting sample.
Yeah.
Not one that we usually talk about. So that in and of itself makes the article really interesting.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I think that everything that's learned in it is applicable to, well, we don't know, of course. It hasn't been researched at a broader level, but it seems like it should be applicable more broadly, not just within this context.
Yeah, and I feel like we consider things that we study in more like corporate contexts applicable to other contexts. So we can, when something's studied in a less corporate setting, we can also similarly say it might apply to a more corporate type context.
Mm-hmm. And I also appreciate when samples like this are used because it's, I don't think we talk about them enough. I don't think we talk about positions and jobs that are just different than like the typical desk job. And I think that some of this study can apply to someone with a typical desk job, of course, but it also applies to shift work in a different way than it probably does than some of our other research does. And shift work is very common in retail and restaurants and other food services and different types of jobs like manufacturing, of course, like here and call centers, etc. So I think that there's something to be said about the population that is doing shift work.
Yeah, definitely.
And what kind of things could help them from a broader perspective too.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. So can you tell us a little bit about the findings?
Yes. So, sneak peek to the findings. Basically, the study finds that team reflexivity, or in other words, like team debrief. So, if people are at the end of a shift, in this case, like they did at manufacturing workers, at the end of each shift, they would do a debrief. And they found that teams that did these 5-minute, 10-minute debriefs about what went well that shift, what didn't go well, and what they could do, in the future, next shift to improve, those teams saw better outcomes. Meaning, those teams saw that they felt they had more support from their colleagues. People also felt like they had more control over their job itself. And that led to them being less burnt out. And they measured burnout with emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and inefficacy. So in other words, there's 3 different ways they were looking at burnout. So whether someone was emotionally tired, were they feeling exhausted at the end of the day, drained, Were they cynical? So were they kind of frustrated? Having negative attitudes overall? And then did they feel inefficacy, which means like, did they feel like they weren't competent or productive, or maybe a lowered sense of accomplishment? So doing these team debriefs helped people feel less exhausted, less cynical, and less ineffective, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how you trying to figure out how to change that word.
That's awesome. So it seems like,
so overall, it's
time,
had a
I know
positive
like
effect on
everybody's work environments this day and age is so fast paced. And especially when you're working on teams, you're sending emails back and forth. Things are flying, from one person to another. You're trying to hit a deadline, whatever. It can be difficult to remind yourself kind of to slow down and take the time to debrief. But it seems like what they're saying is that taking time to connect with each other as a team and make sure everyone's on the same page is actually beneficial, not just for the team's performance, but also for people feeling good about where they are in the team. Do they talk at all about why they think that might be true? Like, what is it that those debriefs do for people?
So they talk a little bit about that. Like, they're talking about how, they actually thought that it would also have an impact on people's perceptions of demand. So, like, how demanding do they feel their job is, and like how many tasks they have to do, but it didn't actually have an impact on that. So when you think about it, it had the things that impacted are kind of intuitive. Like, I am sitting around with my team, I'm reflecting on how the workday went, and we're talking about, what went well, what didn't go well, and everybody's supporting each other, right? Like, if something didn't go well, they help give ideas, they give you feedback, you give them feedback, so people are kind of have this open conversation. So the support increasing makes sense. And the same with the job control, because after these debriefs, it's like your input into what you could do, what can be done better next time around is being used. So you're having some input as to how the job's going to be done in the next shift. What are the things that can be changed and can be improved? So they're just kind of, to me, they seem like natural progressions from having these debrief conversations.
Yeah.
And really the reason why they were studying it is to what you'd said earlier about performance. Like, there's been a lot of research on these types of debriefs and improving performance on the job. And so this group of researchers was like, okay, well, we know it improves productivity. We know it improves innovation. We know it reduces mistakes on the job and just generally performance increases. So what about well-being? What about more than that? Like, does it help people feel better? Like, is it a positive thing for the individual outside of performance? And it is.
That's cool. Yeah. It seems like also it could be beneficial for people to feel like, oh, you know what? I matter to this team more broadly. I know we talked before about in motivation theory that people feel like, if they are worthwhile to the team, or they can see a broader purpose for why they're on the team, or they feel more connected than just their little piece of the pie, that sometimes it can make people feel better about what their work is overall. So I would imagine it could also be serving that kind of purpose of, okay, we're going to debrief and I'm going to be able to weigh in on different aspects of the project, and people might ask me for help. And I also might ask other people for help. So it builds some of that camaraderie and support, but it also makes me feel more like, okay, I matter, and I can see more like how what I'm doing fits in with the broader scope of what our project team is doing in general.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and that isn't something they measured in this study. But I do agree that maybe the next time somebody could study that and see how it impacts people, because I think that it does make sense that you would feel like you maybe have not just control over the task, but you have more ownership, you're valued in some way, you make a difference.
Yeah.
And obviously we know that has a lot of positive impacts on employees.
Yeah, definitely. How many teams or how many people were in the study? Like, what was the scope of the study from that perspective?
Yeah, it was actually a company in China. It was an electronics company and a manufacturing teams.
Okay.
And there were 469 people that had all the data points. So they completed all the different surveys. It was kind of, the way they did the study is they split the teams in half. So I can't remember off the top of my head, but there were like over 70 teams.
Okay.
And half of them did not do the shift debrief. The other half started doing shift debriefs, and they did it for 4 weeks.
Cool.
So the control group had like all these different things happening, like different team building activities to kind of control for the fact that they're just talking to their teams more often. But the type of tasks they were doing were different than the debrief tasks. So when they were doing these debriefs, the groups would get together and they would spend their time on 4 different areas. They would first take a minute to reflect on their own behavior. So like, what did they do? How would they explain how they did that day?
Mm-hmm.
Then they would basically use their team members to verify that they're thinking about things properly, right? So, all right, I know XYZ happened today, and I think it was because of these things. And then they kind of all talk to each other to figure out, like, yes, we all agree XYZ happened because Joe did this and Susan did this and whatever. And then they seek feedback from each other, and then they spend some time planning and discussing kind of what the next goals are for the future shift. What is that going to look like? So that's kind of the structure. They were trained in a structure of these debriefs and how to do them effectively. Over the 4 weeks, their debriefs actually got shorter because, one, performance was improving, so probably less issues to discuss, but also, two, they got better at it, right? They knew what they were supposed to talk about, and they were able to kind of streamline the process. So by the end of the study, the debriefs were really like five minutes long. They weren't very long at all. And they saw the impacts that we described. So kind of a pretty decent sized study.
Yeah.
For this kind of group. And, you know, it was pretty diverse too in terms of at least gender. So it was about half men and half women. So that was kind of nice to see given the type of role.
Yeah.
So I think that there's something to be said about that too.
That's cool. Yeah. I think it's good also to note that it's not just the act of having the meeting that made a difference, but it's also the what you do during that meeting. So it's not just like connecting and having more of like a free form kind of flow, like whatever anybody wants to talk about, that they were pretty clear about the specifics of what the meetings needed to include in order for them to be effective. So it's like if people listening want to follow that same methodology, then they have to take the, opportunity to train people on those 4 steps, as opposed to just kind of like letting managers do whatever they want.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a big piece too. And then they also did a pretty good job of separating everything. So the shift piece was actually important because they had, one set of shift teams doing the debriefs, the other shifts not doing them, and they flip-flop shifts. So one week I would be a day shift employee, and the next week I'm a night shift. So it's not like I'm, day shift people are different than night shift people because every week they rotate. But that way that everybody on the same shift is doing it. So there's no like conversation like, oh, what did you guys do? Oh, maybe we should do that on my team, and then start doing it as well on their own.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's like a pretty clean difference between the groups. So I thought that they did a good job with that.
Yeah, that's good too, because I think one of the things that's really hard, just looking at it from a research perspective, is that a lot of companies won't let you as a researcher come in and do half of one thing to one group and another half gets something else. They're like, oh, well, what if somebody finds out later that they could have been having these cool meetings and their team could have been doing better, and then they didn't get the opportunity, or whatever the case may be. But it actually is a really good way to test whether or not something's working. And you get like this pure result, so you can compare before you roll something out. On a wider scale, you can test whether or not it's working in a smaller group. So if people are listening that are interested in this kind of intervention, and you want to do it in a small group first and then compare it to a similarly sized group of teams that didn't have this intervention, you can kind of replicate this yourself and see how it works for you and tweak it how it needs to be tweaked for you. But these kinds of designs, oftentimes I think workplaces don't want to put in place because they're concerned about fairness issues. But on the back end, it also helps you a lot with being able to actually purely derive like what's the difference between doing this and not doing this. So you have to weigh the pros and cons. But I think like if this is something that you think you could pull off in your workplace, the method is one that doesn't have to stay in the research. It can also be done in practice.
Exactly. And the thing is that you can always then put in the intervention after.
Yeah.
So, it was a 4-week time period. And from what it sounded like in the paper, it sounds like they probably did implement the team debriefs for everybody. So after 4 weeks, everyone's doing it. So like, yeah, fairness, maybe for a month you didn't experience that because you were in the other group, but you now are doing it and you've learned that it is important. So maybe now even all those teams will probably take it even more seriously and make it even better.
Yeah.
So it's really not super unfair, right? Especially if it's random. As long as you're not picking like, oh, these are my favorite teams, so they get to do it.
Right.
Then that's where the fairness issue comes into play. If it's random and then you implement it for everybody after, I think it's totally fine.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that it's awesome when researchers are able to partner with organizations who are willing to do those kinds of studies, because then you can see much more cleanly what's working and what's not working. So that's a pretty cool method. If anyone wants to take notes on that, trying to demonstrate sort of the clean difference between two interventions, it's a pretty good idea.
Agreed. And if anybody wants to implement it, I think that's another really good idea based on the research. I think that here, like, what they did is that the debriefs were at the end of each shift, right? So I think I already mentioned that. And so I think for shift jobs, like, that's really easy. You know, nursing, for example. I mean, most hospitals already do this, really, when you're changing shifts from one nursing team to the next, because you have to share information across the team. So you're kind of debriefing with your team, and then you're also sharing information with the new team. So it'd be good to make sure that during those debriefs, you take the time to reflect on what worked and what didn't work, and to plan for their next shift, their future shift. But then, you know, that can also help the new team plan for their future shift. So I think there's, you know, a lot that's already being done, and it would just be very wise to make sure that you reflect on what, you know, that specific tasks, not just saying, oh, so-and-so in that room needs whatever, but like when there was a problem, what happened? How do we fix it? What are the solutions? You know, what could we have done differently?
Right.
So that you're doing that reflection piece. Cause I think that's probably a big component to these debriefs.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think any shift job, this would make sense. Like restaurants do these. They have shifts. A lot of restaurants do. At least for the first shift, they might do like a pre-brief.
Yeah.
And so it might be good to think about doing them at the end of shifts, so you have some debriefs as well. And I think that's another kind of industry that maybe has some clear-cut shifts. Call centers is another one. And again, I think that there's some companies that I've seen that do debriefs, and that's great because they're already probably reaping some of these benefits. And for those that aren't, it makes sense to add them. And I think the other place you could add debriefs is if you're not doing shift work, that maybe it makes more sense to not do them quite as frequently, right? Like for me at the end of my day, if I like got together with my team and said like, okay, let's debrief on the day, I'd be like, well, I had 4 meetings. Like, I don't know. It doesn't really translate properly. But we do have every 2 weeks, we have like a team meeting where we talk about like what's been working, where are we having issues, etc. So you could kind of do it that way. Maybe you could do it once a week, or maybe you just do it around projects. So like after you have like a really big client meeting, then afterwards you do a debrief and talk about what went well, what you could have done better.
Yeah.
So, and doing it more formally. Like we definitely do that kind of informally after meetings, after big meetings when we're traveling, but I'd be really happy if we could make it a more formal thing, and I think maybe we could get some benefits from that.
Yeah, and I also think if you have teams that are working virtually and you have people in different time zones or things like that, you might be able to leverage technology to even think about, okay, could we have people who are working on the project in India, let's say, work on it in their time zone and then record like a short video of what they did, what went well, what didn't go well, things that they might need brainstorming help with or whatever. And then the next team might be able to respond to that by video and send them something back to sort of mimic some of those things. Or you find a time and alternate the time when people meet to discuss how the project's going. And sometimes it's late for one group and another time it's late for another group or something like that. But just trying to find ways to sort of connect and make sure that people are still getting that face-to-face interaction, still getting the feedback, and still able to provide input in a more structured fashion. So you're not just relying on people remembering to do it or, you know, hoping that people will just think to ask their colleagues to weigh in.
I think that's a really good point, that when you have like really different time zones, like I don't deal with the crazy time zones like that that often, and all my team members are in the US, so our time differences are not huge.
Right.
But when you have something like that, like you usually have, I mean, this is probably not always true, but I feel like generally you'd have a couple people in each of those locations. Yeah. So like maybe India does a debrief, and then the US does a debrief, and then Europe does a debrief at the end of each day or end of each whatever that looks
Yeah.
like. And then do like a more global one once a month. So that way, because I know that times can be really, really challenging if you want to have good work-life balance,
Yeah.
which obviously we recommend that. And you don't want people to have to like
Go crazy.
leave their families at like 7 p.m.
Right.
or like wake up at 4 in the morning or something like that. So you do it less frequently. But I think if you can do the regionalized ones and, like you said, document it in some way, then you could, in theory, kind of have like this different type of debrief. And it'd be really interesting to see how that would work out. I mean, like we could do research on that and see how that looks.
Yeah.
And maybe that would have a big impact too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that, you know, it's always difficult when you're working like across time zones or with, you know, people who are just not on the same work schedule, or maybe you have a project that spans shifts or whatever, but thinking about how to get creative about it. And I think that the idea is just sort of, as you're mentioning, you know, really thinking hard about how do we create that like feedback loop between people and the ability for people to feel connected to one another, and not kind of feel like a silo. And if you can find a way to do that, I think what you're saying is that it improves performance. And also I think that it's another lesson of what we talk about all the time, is that people see these like time investments as time wasters when they're in the heat of the moment. Like, oh, we don't have time for that. Like, we have to get this and that done. We don't have time for a meeting, or we don't have time for a call. But they're literally talking about eventually, you know, dedicating 5 minutes to something like this. And so, you know, you have 5 minutes to dedicate to it, or 10 minutes to dedicate to it. And it's something that ends up saving you time and makes you more efficient in the long term. So like we talk about with a lot of human capital related processes that support wellness, it's like you have to put some time in, but what you get out is greater than what you're investing. And you just have to like trust the process.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that you need to think of things more broadly, more big picture. Like we talk about this all the time. I feel like it's a common theme, right? You don't want to spend money on, I don't know, maternity leave, or you don't want to spend money on insurance, or you don't want to spend money on gym memberships for your employees, or you don't want to spend the time to do whatever, like all those things. You know, you don't want to spend, give people breaks, give people time off, whatever that looks like. You're just so worried about the time wasted or the money spent that you're not really thinking about how it actually would be a benefit for the big picture and for the bottom line down the road. That it's not just, okay, well, we're taking 10 minutes every day to talk about this topic. Like, is that really worth my time? Actually, yes, it is. It is worth the time, because performance is going to improve and wellness is going to improve. So you're going to have employees that are not experiencing burnout, that are, you know, feeling connected and supported by their coworkers, and are performing better and are more efficient and making less mistakes. Like, that is huge.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes is worth probably 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour is worth that.
Right. Yeah.
So I think just getting perspective, and, you know, obviously if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already agree with this. So it's just trying to figure out how to explain this to people that maybe aren't thinking about the picture that way. So, you know, showing them the big picture. Like, there was a study on this topic that looked at many studies looking at debriefs, right? So it was a meta-analysis, and it showed that it improved effectiveness by 25% compared to people that were not doing debriefs. So that's huge.
Yeah.
25%.
Yeah.
Like, you can throw that stat out to an executive, and I guarantee you 25% is going to make them think about it, because that is a big number.
Yeah.
So I think it's just learning how to voice that if you are not in a position to make these decisions. And if you are, take this information and influence your peers and make your company better.
Yeah, that's awesome. So is there anything that we missed that people should know about the findings or what they can do with them?
I'm trying to think. I feel like I had a thought, but I may have lost it to who knows what.
To the lost
I think those are the main
gnome.
long lost thought, just hiding somewhere. I think we touched on the main things though, right? Like making sure employees are not burnt out. Like, we understand why that's a problem. We've talked about that a lot. In a team perspective, there's one piece that I didn't mention, is that having team members that are burnt out actually reduces the overall team stability and their overall productivity as a team. So not just at an employee level, but it makes the team less productive overall if a couple of members are burnt out. So that's something to think about too.
Yeah, totally.
And then, yeah, but other than that, I think we kind of covered it all. Like, the key things are just giving some people time to debrief, or taking the time, if you're one of the team members, to debrief.
Yeah.
And seeing the kind of benefits you can reap. So I think from an employee perspective, it's maybe encouraging your team members to do this and maybe lead the charge. If you're a manager, you should set this up and encourage your teams to do it. And if you're a leader, a senior leader, then maybe you want to think about how you can make this a consistent practice within your organization. Just kind of an expected process that happens, at the end of a shift, at the end of a project, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. And I think it's always nice when there's sort of a straightforward intervention that people can do that, usually the answer to all of our questions is, well, it depends. Well, it's complicated. And while that's true to some extent with this study, this is an intervention-based study that, you can put in place within your workplace, and there's a formula for it. They've given you kind of a script to follow in terms of what the intervention looks like. So it turns out to be, more straightforward and a little bit easier to deploy when you have something that is, pretty easy to understand and put in place. So I hope that people actually do it.
Yeah, agreed. It's easy. It's cheap. You can totally do it in your workplace. So take advantage, especially if you're working in teams a lot. This is something that should be used. And really, there's no harm in it, right? It's not going to do anything bad.
Right.
So you might as well put it in place and see if you reap the benefits.
And if you do put it in place, measure the outcomes that you're interested in affecting before and after, so that you can show like this practice is actually doing something, and then people will think you're really cool and smart because you're actually able to show the impact of what you're doing on outcomes, and then people will be more likely to follow your lead in doing it because you're able to document why it was a good thing.
Good point. And if you have questions about how to do that and what to measure, you can always reach out. You can always find us. You can you can send us an email at workerbeing@gmail.com. You can find us at workerbeing.com, and you can find us on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, at workerbeing. So
thank you so much for reading this. Oh, thank you so much for reading this. We really appreciate it.
Of course. I'm glad it was helpful. I thought it was really interesting and pretty simple and straightforward. So I hope people use it and actually take advantage of this research.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. The Worker Being podcast is hosted by us, Patricia Grabarek
and Katina Sawyer, and produced by Allie Johnson.